Welcome to Podkey Daily News, where today the pressure is on politics, power, and infrastructure. A cabinet-level credibility fight is colliding with whistleblower evidence. Britain's fiscal room looks tight before a budget is even written, and the AI buildout is running into a very physical limit: electricity. The sharpest new political exposure is around Howard Lutnick. Newly surfaced emails from May 2018 show Lutnick discussing the Adfin ad tech venture with Jeffrey Epstein, which matters because Lutnick had publicly claimed he cut ties back in 2005. There is also a December 2012 Adfin investment agreement naming both Lutnick and Epstein as investors, creating a documented financial link, not just a social or incidental one. On top of that, leaked photos place Lutnick on Epstein's private Caribbean island in December 2012. Those images were initially removed from a public release and later republished, directly undercutting the idea that there was no meaningful post-2005 relationship. That all lands against Lutnick's May 2026 House oversight testimony, where he said he met Epstein only twice after 2005. Democrats are now calling for his resignation and accusing him of lying to Congress. If this moves beyond a media fight, the practical question is whether investigators treat the discrepancy as a credibility problem or a perjury problem. The other major part of this story is Simon Andrews, the whistleblower who helped expose the Lutnick-Epstein connections. Andrews says he faced repeated retaliation, including pressure to join video calls while he was receiving emergency medical care, and he was ultimately dismissed by BGC in January 2017. The personal toll was severe. He suffered multiple cardiac events, dissociative seizures, and flashbacks linked to the stress, spent 2 months in a trauma recovery center, and has been left with major legal costs. There is at least some institutional validation here. U.S. authorities later fined BGC, and Andrews received a U.S. Whistleblower Award. That does not erase the damage, but it turns this from a private employment grievance into a broader warning about how costly it can be to surface misconduct inside major financial firms. 2 deal threads make the overall picture worse for Lutnick. First, Adfin formally linked Lutnick and Epstein in a commercial venture around advertising technology. Second, separate documents describe a proposed £1 million loan from Lutnick to Prince Andrew in exchange for exclusive access to the prince's high net worth contacts, with business routed through Cantor Fitzgerald for fee revenue. Even as a proposal, that is the kind of arrangement that raises immediate questions about influence, access selling, and who was meant to profit from royal proximity. In UK politics, Andy Burnham is signaling continuity on fiscal discipline rather than any early spending break. He has publicly committed to sticking with Rachel Reeves's fiscal rules, which tells markets and departments that the next government would still be operating inside tight budget constraints. The immediate problem is that those constraints are colliding with new costs. Keir Starmer has already announced an extra £15 billion for defense over 4 years, and roughly a third of that is unfunded. That leaves the familiar menu: spending cuts elsewhere, more borrowing, or tax rises. Analysts increasingly expect tax increases in an autumn budget if Burnham wants to fund new priorities without dropping the rules. There is also speculation around Shabana Mahmood as chancellor, largely because she is seen as flexible rather than ideologically fixed, which could make her the vehicle for Burnham's fiscal line rather than an internal counterweight. On foreign policy, Burnham is also pledging continuity on Ukraine aid. That signals steadiness, but it keeps pressure on a budget that is already stretched and could complicate relations with a more hardline U.S. presidency. The AI infrastructure story keeps getting bigger, and the numbers are now hard to ignore. Analysts estimate Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, and Oracle will spend a combined $741 billion on data center construction and upgrades in 2024 alone. The United States already has more than 3,000 operating data centers, with roughly 1,500 more projects in the pipeline. Why this matters is simple. AI demand is no longer mainly a software story. It is a land, power, water, and permitting story. That is where resistance is building. A May Gallup poll found 7 in 10 Americans oppose new data centers in their own area, mainly over water use, electricity demand, and property values. About 240 local governments in the U.S. have enacted moratoriums on new projects. New York imposed a temporary statewide ban, and Maine came close to doing the same before its governor vetoed the measure. Utilities and communities are worried that hyperscale projects will outrun grid capacity and push costs onto households. New York's governor explicitly cited protecting ratepayers. Governments are also starting to use tax policy to slow things down, trimming incentives for equipment purchases that used to help make these projects easy wins for local officials. The regulatory response is now shifting from local backlash to formal standards. The European Union is designing a star rating system for data centers based on energy sources, water use, and sustainability, with continent-wide minimum standards to follow. Ireland has already moved in a more direct way. Developers there now have to bring their own power supply, which is forcing redesigns around dedicated wind, on-site solar, or bio-natural gas. This is the next phase to watch, not whether data centers get built, but where they can still get built fast, cheaply, and with enough electricity to matter. Germany is trying to position itself as one of those places, but it has a real credibility gap to close. Berlin plans to showcase its status as the only G7 country with a AAA credit rating at an October investment summit, using macro stability as the core selling point. The problem is that investors keep pointing to high energy costs, red tape, and slow approvals. That is especially damaging for AI and data center investment, where cheap power and fast deployment are central. Germany is also committing about 600 billion euros over several years to rebuild defense capabilities under NATO pressure, which may stimulate domestic industry but also competes for capital and state attention. A proposed pension shift toward capital market investment could eventually channel tens of billions into growth assets, but that is a medium-term reform. Right now, the near-term test is whether Germany can pair financial stability with actual execution speed. Those are the developments to watch: credibility risk in Washington, fiscal constraint in Britain, and an AI boom that still has to plug into the real world. This is Podkey Daily News. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.